Welcome to the Sleeping Barber podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of our Barber's Brief, where Mark and I like to highlight things that we've caught our eye in the last few weeks. Could be a paper, it could be in the news, anything's fair game in that segment. We also like to highlight a marketing moment, which again could be anything from like anything, and then finally wrap up with an ad of the week, which is exactly what it says. It's an ad of the week specifically.
So my takeaway from this is that we could be talking about anything at any point in time.
Anything, literally anything.
It could be. It's very exciting. You never know what's going to come up next.
That's right. Mark, good morning.
Good morning.
Outside. Holy smokes.
Yeah, and snow.
We got our first snowfall. So you know what? I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it.
I didn't mind it either. It was nice.
I mean, ski season's just around the corner.
Yeah. Like
right?
Another month or so. And I think, well, even less than. I think a lot of the ski hills are going to start opening up around here. So that'll be fun.
Yep.
Yeah.
Before we kick off, another exciting thing is we get to be joining the cult gathering later this week.
That's true.
This drops on a Thursday. We will be on-prem.
Yeah.
In Banff, enjoying a lot of the great speaker lineups. Hopefully we get Gary V.
Yeah, that'd be good.
We get Gary V to commit to an episode. That'd be great.
Yeah. Sans mics, that's French for without mics.
Without mics, that's right.
Yeah.
We're going to take it in as...
This is the extent of my French. And I can swear in French. But outside of that, that's it.
Très bien, mon ami. There we go.
All right, what do you got in the news, V?
Well, I usually deviate to always finding like news articles, but this one I could not turn down from our good friend Robert Af Klintberg from the
from Capero.
Capero, exactly. He has had a series of write-ups recently, and he's kind of going down this path around like the in-housing side. So he talked about in-house versus downtown agencies. And I thought it was really, really interesting way of kind of thinking about, the misconceptions, the cost savings, or the misconception of those cost savings that a lot of people naturally go to.
Yeah.
So he articulates, and obviously we'll link the article in the show notes. But the idea that in-house agencies are cheaper than external ones is widely accepted, but is it actually true?
Right.
And I think that's the biggest at some point, a realization that a lot of organizations do go through as they go down these in-housing projects. So while in-housing agencies offer lower hourly rates to avoid extra charges for changes, many marketing departments fail to measure actual costs. Now, when we analyze the data, he says when data is analyzed, they often find that in-house agencies aren't as cost-effective as expected. And this is due for a few reasons. The first being the lack of budget visibility on hours spent. Unnecessary production due to no perceived costs, involvement of too many people internally. I mean, I could see that becoming a thing. Inefficient processes and sloppy internal briefs. To optimize your agent setup, he recommends it is crucial to evaluate your actual costs and explore hybrid models for better balance and efficiency. He also highlights a few questions. I've kind of married a couple posts here, but questions to consider for future-proofing your in-house agency, if that's a direction that you're taking your organization down, is what is the strategic role of your in-house function? Right. I think clearly defining that, it could be speed to market, and you're not making a case for efficiency. It's just a byproduct in some areas, but it's like the strategic role is going to be, increasing our speed to market. Another great question is, are you measuring its effectiveness against external options? And how are you doing so?
Yeah.
A third is your structure flexible and cost effective? Because again, when you think about like you're going to be times of being really amped up, there's going to be lower times in the year. So how are you actually creating that effectiveness or the cost effectiveness? The fourth question is, how well does your in-house agency collaborate with external partners? So you would still need external vendors and partners that you're working with. It's not 100% internalized. Like no agency is 100% internalized that way. You still rely on other partners. And he also highlighted, like there was he was at a recent seminar hosted by People, where he discussed these challenges and what was the biggest kind of realization that came out of the essentially like the commentary is like efficiency does not equal effectiveness in some of these models. So again, there's a lot to unpack here. I think I'm always drawn to these topics. I'm fascinated by them just by nature of what I do in my day to day. But it's kind of like, I like the questions, and I like how, you need to be thinking about these a little bit more holistically to actually create an in-house program. Again, if that's the direction you're going, that can stand the test of time.
Yeah, it's a really interesting article. I saw that too. And the questions I thought were really good.
Yeah.
And especially your point around having a hybrid model. Probably the truth is somewhere in between. Like, I don't think it's all in-house, and it's probably not all external either. So somewhere in the middle is really important. I really love that question around what's the strategic role of your in-house function?
Yeah.
Because that really, and then by extension, what's the strategic role of your out-of-house agency? I mean, those kinds of things are really important because you can go down any path you want. And so just by looking at what's cheaper, you're not necessarily optimizing for the right thing.
No.
So I think that's a really good question. And it's one of those questions that comes up all the time. It's like, it's almost a trend, like every couple of years where they expand into like, well, we're all going to go out of home or out of house and then hire agencies. Then they're like, no, we're going to bring it all in. And it just keeps going back and forth like an accordion.
Yeah, that's a great point. What caught your eye?
Well, another Nike article, Omar, who we just had on, which was a really great conversation, tagged me in a post from Aswath Damodaran. Aswath Damodaran. First time I've tried to say that. So he's a professor of finance at Stern School of Business at New York University.
Prof. G's University.
What's that?
Prof. G's University, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
At NYU?
I think so. It was a really interesting blog post that he put up. He was trying to assess the value of the brand. Like, there's been all these articles and we've talked about a few of them about Nike and how they had the new CEO and they said, we're bringing everything in-house, and they went direct to consumer. We're bringing everything in-house. Funny. They went direct to consumer and cut out all of their, they started cutting out all their retail partners and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So this article is more about part brand lessons, but also trying to determine the valuation of a brand, which I thought was really interesting. And so one of the things he kind of talked about was the essence of a brand name. The brand name value is the recognition or remembrance of a brand name changes depending on how people behave in its presence, or the value of that brand is because it changes how people behave. So with customers or consumers, brand name recognition can manifest itself in buying choices. So you're accelerating growth or accelerating revenue, willingness to pay, higher profit margins. But on the capital side, which I never really thought about before, it allows for lower funding costs with equity investors, lenders accepting lower interest rates, fewer lending covenants. So there's some interesting components there that I've never really considered before on the finance side of things.
Sure.
He modeled out a few interesting case studies. Some of these things are going to be, we've all seen Tylenol at the pharmacy, like at Shoppers Drug Mart or wherever. And then right beside it is a generic acetaminophen from whichever store you're buying from. And side by side, they're on the shelf. And yet Tylenol still does very well. And you're paying an extra $2.50 a bottle kind of thing or more for Tylenol. And so it's interesting because you can see the price impact so clearly on branding in a scenario like that, where it's just essentially a commodity. And everybody has access to it and all that kind of stuff. Coca-Cola, he talked about as well as a financial valuation that he looked at. And he looked at Coke compared to generic soda and then the median in that category. And so he looked at things like pre-tax operating margin, industry weighted average margin, the value of the brand relative to GE, or maybe I feel like I might have forgot to fill in the rest of the words on that. But anyway, so 82% of Coke's intrinsic value comes from the brand name.
Wow.
Yeah, when you compare it to the other generics
That's
in
crazy.
the median. Yeah, it's really interesting. So then he looked at Nike and he looked at 3 periods. So from 2014 to 2018, and 2019 to 2023, and then the past 12 months. And so and he looked at annual growth rate, average operating margin over 3 periods. And there's this general decline. And we've talked, and that's what everybody's been talking about.
Right.
Growth rate shrank. Operating margin has been increasing in a bad way. I mean, the value of the equity and the value per share are all going down. So there's problems that everybody's identified. The implications, though, that I think are really interesting, that I'll just skip over to some of the warnings for brand managers. So your past success will never guarantee your future success.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting.
Pepsi.
Yeah. So like you've got an aging consumer base always, right?
Yeah.
And so what was really smart before was maybe not so smart now.
Yeah.
You can neglect the brand. There's cultural changes. There's changing consumer taste. There's toxic connections or partnerships you might have built over time. You might have done too many things in overreaching your brand. So
Sure.
yeah, like all those things are interesting. And from a management perspective, you kind of just think, oh, I'm managing this brand, like from an advertising point of view, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
Product alignment, product updates, product relevance, that kind of stuff. All that stuff matters.
It does. And this one graph that you have, this one table that you have here that shows growth rate, operating margin, value of equity, and you have it grouped by dates. So like 2014, 2018, 2019, 2023, and then the last 12 months. I think you could really see it like, oh shit. Yeah, this is not going in the right direction. So yeah.
So there's lots of things about creating a brand, and it's becoming more and more interesting. Like we've talked about this a little bit before, how like there's performance marketing, which is like the things that are happening quickly and fast, and on each channel you can see ROAS and that kind of stuff. But when we're talking about brand more and more, I'm like, yeah, this is a different set of metrics. It's a different timeline.
That's true.
If we're talking about competitive moat, pricing power, low cost of capital, like that doesn't just happen overnight.
I love that, actually. Oh, I'm going to write something down here, Mark. Like you just blew my mind.
Oh my gosh. It's so exciting. I don't know what to do.
It's good.
What do you got?
Well, I was going to call him your doppelganger, but I don't know. Maybe that's true. But Mark Ritson.
Flattering for me.
And his opinion piece, Dom Pérignon perfectly demonstrates the appeal of scarcity. This could have very easily been a marketing moment. I think there was a lot of great information that he kind of put out in there. But just to set the scene, if you will, dim the lights. Dom Pérignon exemplifies that power of scarcity in the luxury branding by choosing not to release a vintage in 2023 due to suboptimal quality, reinforcing its exclusivity and prestige. So it was like the summer of 2023. It was, from what I understand, really humid, especially in regions of France where a lot of these vineyards are, or where at least Dom Pérignon's is. And that just really didn't create the optimal harvesting season. I don't know if that's. I'm sorry, people that are probably more wine connoisseurs than I am, but it didn't create the great environment to really put out some really great wine. So what Dom Pérignon decided is not to release one of those vintages for 2023 to essentially protect its brand. So Marc Ritson argues that Dom Pérignon's choice should have been seized as a major PR opportunity by showcasing its unwavering commitment to quality. The brand could have further distinguished itself as a luxury leader, reinforcing its unique position in the market. So for me, there's a few takeaways here, just kind of like key learnings, if you will. So obviously, scarcity can drive luxury. By choosing not to release a vintage when quality doesn't meet their standards. Dom Pérignon, isn't it? Is it Dom or Don?
Dom.
I'm horrible at this stuff. Anyways, Because it's upholding.
I get it.
You just Dom Perignon reinforces luxury status, scarcity enhances brand prestige and exclusivity. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Brand consistency is crucial, and we've talked about this in different ways in terms of like consistency. So again, Dom Perignon's vintage-only approach is central to its identity. So again, staying consistent to that and upholding this, even if it's at a financial cost, strengthens the brand's integrity and differentiates it from its competitors. It's still that premium wine. Opportunity and setbacks. So again, skipping a vintage presents a unique opportunity in storytelling. While fiscally, it was probably tough pill to swallow internally. Hey, we're not releasing a vintage. This, they can probably look at the amount of revenue those vintages create and skipping that. But taking that opportunity and creating a narrative around the why we're missing out on that, I think was an opportunity that they likely, and I think Marc articulated, could have done a little bit better. Disruption as strategy. So great brands often break industry norms. Dom Perignon's decision not to compromise its quality disrupts expectations, positioning and brand as exceptional and non-generic. And then it also goes a long way in building long-term brand building. So it's maintaining its brand values, even in challenging times. It builds that long-term equity and consumer trust. Short-term sacrifice for quality can pay off for stronger brand loyalty and higher demand in the future. So those are the 5 lessons from Dom Perignon, according to Marc Ritson, which I think they're all very valuable. They're all very valuable. Not everything can apply to every business in this case.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think there's a lot of cool little nuggets here.
Yeah, for sure. I think committing to a product quality idea makes a lot of sense. In their case, where it like really takes a lot of stones, is like that is a whole year's worth of product that you're pretty much. I'm sure they found another. I feel like this is an Emily in Paris episode that I watched with my kids, where there's some vineyard or perfume guy that didn't meet his quality, so they created a new label and then sold it as some other secondary label.
Good job, Emily in Paris.
Yeah. So maybe Marc got a marketing lesson from Emily in Paris.
We should ask him when we bring him on.
Tell me, did Emily teach you everything you know about marketing?
Exactly.
But I think that's really hard to make that call, because you're just kind of kissing your product for a whole year goodbye right now, right?
Product, any sort of profitability, you're right. Like it takes stones to do that. And I was trying to think of a very simple example, like in other industries, like that would be something similar. It's like Coke not releasing Coke for a year.
Remember in Canada a long time ago, I think it was in Canada, there was there was a listeria scare with Maple Leaf food, and then there was one from Tylenol that I think is like a long-term case study. That might not be a Canada thing, but there was a molecule that got into some Tylenol bottles, from what I can recall. I think it's Tylenol,
right?
And it ended up killing a few people, like a handful of people, which is awful. But rather than take the risk and trying to figure out which batch it came from, they just ripped out all of the Tylenol from all of the store shelves. And the same thing with Maple Leaf Foods. I remember them doing that as well when there was a listeria outbreak.
Sure.
And it was speaking to the quality. So there's no doubt about the quality ever.
No.
Long term, it probably has a huge
impact,
benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last one.
Okay. There is a really great white paper from Mailchimp on how to grow your brand. Funny enough, Marc Ritson's featured in there, along with Les Bennett, Ty Heath, Peter Weinberg, John Lombardo, and Jamal Miller. I think Jamal is from Mailchimp, if I'm not mistaken. And so it's focused advice on how small brands grow and a summary of marketing effectiveness literature. So there's really some great stuff from Les talking about good advice on how brands grow, thinking about it from a perspective of new brands, underinvested brands, small categories, expensive brands, capacity constraints. So there's some really interesting things in there. A couple of the nuggets from me: for small brands, focus on expanding your customer base and your customer experience, and then loyalty will come. Like focusing on loyalty, it's really a weak influence on growth.
Right.
Which might sound funny to a lot of people, especially in the context of what we were just talking about before, where there's like things like the cult gathering, which is really about loyalty and maybe more customer experience than loyalty. But yeah, there's a lot of belief that loyalty is the path to growth. So it's kind of interesting. From a niche perspective, if you've got a product in a niche category, pick one segment at a time, conquer that, and then move on. So that was an interesting takeaway, I thought. And then underdogs, they have an advantage in the sense of they can have, even though they're an underdog, they can really deliver great creative. That is, you can, because you're a challenger brand, you don't have to follow the norms. Like there's no sense in trying to benchmark against the other titans of the category. So you've got a lot of opportunity, a lot more freedom, and probably a lot more flexibility to try and create noise and amplify. That we were talking with Adam Morgan. Just don't be dull.
Don't be dull. It's
right?
very simple. Very simple.
The big takeaway for me, though, in general, was that this is now like the third or fourth white paper I've seen about effectiveness with featuring people like Les and Mark and Ty. So there's been one in Facebook now. There's one on TikTok and now Mailchimp. So it's an interesting trend for me that now these platforms are adopting this stuff, and leveraging it and training marketers through the platforms on marketing effectiveness.
It feels like, I don't know if we're at a tipping point with marketing effectiveness principles and laws, if you will, but it's. I don't know if because we're just immersed in it ourselves, but there does seem to be a lot more literature around this stuff than ever before.
Yeah.
Which is a great thing. Is a great thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You've got the marketing moment, B.
It's the marketing moment.
Oh, new jingle.
It is a new jingle because one of our commenters on YouTube said yes to a marketing moment jingle. So there we go. Thank you.
I like
for that comment, by the way. I like
it.
And engage with us. Talk to us. We love your comments. So, okay. So my marketing moment today is a departure from what we usually do, which is a case study. But that's okay. That's why we call it a marketing moment.
This is where the anything can happen kind of thing. This is what makes it so exciting.
Exactly. This is what makes our show so riveting. So
I'm going to throw jazz hands now just because you don't know what's going to happen.
You should. So I was in a very privileged position where I got to attend Adweek 2024 in New York. I do want to apologize in advance from our last Barber's brief that I did do live from New York where the audio wasn't great. So, I have the right mic in front of my face again, which is great. Mm-hmm. So Adweek 2024 was really, really interesting. For those that don't know, haven't attended before, it's very heavy on the panel side. 30-minute panels for a lot of various topics, for that really, I guess matter, if you will, from a consumer perspective, from a practitioner perspective, which was great. I'll talk a little about that a little bit later. But for me, there was kind of 5-6 key themes that kind of came out of it. So the first one was CTV and retail media. So CTV has not only transitioned from it being just like a niche mainstream, how does it become additive to your core strategy from a omni-channel perspective, to actually becoming probably one of the biggest pillars that you're looking at when you're activating against some of these larger campaigns, especially it's what is your CTV strategy? How are you doing that? So there was a lot of panels that discussed, CTV, the importance of CTV. The second thing for me that was a big, because it's not here yet in Canada, but it's the retail media networks. So you think of the Targets, the Walmarts, all of them. Target has their retail media network is called Roundel. If I were to show you pictures of how much space Roundel had actually created, you'd think that they're like an advertiser, like a Google. They had pop-ups, they had advertising everywhere. So it just goes to show you, like, this is almost like the next frontier of inventory that's coming into the hands of advertisers. So Roundel, Kenvue are driving those full funnel approaches across their media networks. They're blending digital and in-store experiences as well, which is, again, something really unique because we haven't really had it that way. And these channels are showing immense growth. And I would argue we're a little bit behind the curve here in Canada. That's to come here as well. And it's going to be really interesting. And, quick plug for the Trade Desk, because the Trade Desk is going to be featuring a lot of that inventory first here in Canada of those retail media networks, which is great, where you can kind of find one single place to source it. The second big thing was AI's role in advertising. So, obviously AI continues to drive and advance really rapidly, especially in media planning and audience targeting techniques. But many companies still struggle with the adoption due to concerns around brand safety, compliance, and costs. So while AI has been somewhat transformative in scaling things like ads, the focus is shifted toward its potential for first-party data modeling, enhancing creativity. Now, this is where there was almost like two different, you would hear two different conversations happening. It's like, is it actually an effectiveness creative tool for the long term? Not saying about like short content and things like that. The other side is, I saw in action Viant. It's a DSP where they've released their own generative AI. And this AI tool basically is, you could put in campaign parameters. I want to put a campaign in market for 60 days. Here's the budget. Here's the demo. Here's all these parameters. Can you suggest a media plan? And it goes ahead, and it's based on a lot of their own first-party data, how they've structured campaigns and things like that. So this engine is now creating bespoke media plans based on the inputs. Now, would I trust it enough to say, yeah, here's my media plan? No, but I think it's almost signaling where we're going. So if you need benchmarks, if you want something quick and dirty, you can basically just have a conversation with some of these AI tools that are rooted in a lot of that first party data. So that's where I feel it's going to be really interesting as that continues to evolve, or at least in our industry, how AI is going to be adopted more and more. Okay, couple more here just to wrap up. You literally cannot avoid a conversation around first party data. Like, everywhere you look, it's always, how do you harness it? How do you do it? How do you make sure you're capturing the right signals? So with third-party cookies phasing out, which is, even though Google's not deprecating it, we keep talking about, like, the consumer will deprecate it anyways. It doesn't matter. Brands are turning to those first-party data solutions like Unique ID 2.0 by using email, phone numbers, login data, device data, anything. Like, there's a lot of those signals that brands are are leaning on more. They just kind of go on to reiterate, like, how important it is to make sure that you do have that first party data plan, because it is what will save you somewhat in this. Now, we're going to talk about privacy in a second, but the one thing I just want to touch on when it comes to harnessing that first party data is how you're asking for it. Because, like, there's implicit and explicit first party data. So you need to make sure you're able to kind of capture and create that holistic picture. And that's where things like a CDP, a customer data platform, becomes really important, where you can marry a lot of the different inputs to showcase, this person is a return caller, constantly struggling with some tech. Well, how do we use that information to fuel some of our external media buys? Maybe we don't target them because they're not happy, for example, or, they're showing their displeasure on social. Okay, let's exclude this audience, etc. So anyways, a few things there on just the first party side. Privacy and regulatory uncertainty. So the U.S. is unique when it comes to Canada in some cases, because there's not a lot of federal regulation around a lot of the privacy laws. They're all state governed. And because of that, it actually makes it a very complex environment to operate in, because every state's somewhat a little bit different in how they approach these privacy laws. So it still remains a critical challenge, which is really interesting to see how, they continue to navigate that. One really interesting thing, which I think has a direct tie to this, is like Google's absence from the event was insane. They had no branding, no what's it called? No booths.
Signage in any way, yeah.
Absolutely nothing. And I couldn't help to think that it actually had to do with like their ongoing DOJ trial, which again kind of comes back into that privacy and regulatory uncertainty, which I feel like there's this, no one's really talking about this, but I believe this trial could actually shape and change the way our discipline is actually being administered moving forward. So it was really, really, really interesting to see their absence. It was definitely felt. And then finally, a declining focus on social purpose, DEI, and sustainability. Discussions around social purpose, DEI, sustainability were non-existent. Were not only notably absent, there were no conversations around these areas, which were, I don't know, I want to say 3 years ago, It was like, it was the thing.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about these things, full stop. So for me, it's one of those moments where you're like, man, have we turned a corner here? I'm not saying sustainability is not important. Not saying DEI is not important. Not saying social purpose isn't important. But do they take more of a backseat now than what they used to be, were drivers of some of those marketing communications?
Mm-hmm.
So that is my quick summary, if you will, of my time at Adweek 2024 in New York. A lot of great conversations, but I couldn't help to notice some of these themes.
Yeah, it's super interesting. As far as these are kind of like, you can call them trends almost. Like they hit on some of the trends that you keep seeing over and over again.
Yeah.
The connected TV thing is super interesting for sure. From an execution point of view, like I mean, I guess they're all execution because you're talking about like how to use the data and using AI and that kind of stuff. And it's really interesting hearing all that.
Yeah. It's time for
Ad of the week. So again, this is a Nike thing.
You love Nike.
I know. It's just that it keeps. Maybe it's because it's in my feed, and then I'm just like hyper consuming all things Nike. But there's a month ago, there's a new video that was released called Sunshine. It's super. I don't know if it's me looking into Nike and trying to find things up. It's like my own bias, maybe looking at Nike and finding the things I want to find. But about a month ago, they released this running video called Sunshine, and it's, like You Are My Sunshine, that song. And people are running in pouring rain for the whole time. But it's really interesting because, the ends with winning isn't comfortable, which seems to be a new tagline for them, so not just do it. But it feels to me like a very Nike ad. And it's a great ad. Yeah, and it kind of has that like inspiration kind of thing. I don't know if it's, and this is the part where I don't know if this is my bias, but like Nike turning the corner, to me, this is kind of one of those spots where it shows like I can almost hear a boardroom table conversation around, we need to reclaim what made us great. Yeah. Go back to the like just do it kind of approach. Root down on our core audiences and figure out who we're trying to speak to and reconnect with them and all kind of stuff. That's to me where this fits. There's a tagline in there: if you don't hate running a little, you don't love running enough. Yeah. And so to me, it was just one of those things where I was like, yeah, that's good. It made you feel something, especially if, not that I'm a runner, but I appreciate the desire to be out there doing the thing that you love doing, no matter what the weather looks like. Yeah.
I would argue it's a very inspirational spot. I think when you picked it out and I saw it, I'm like, ooh, this is, it kind of resonates. It definitely resonates with me. So
yeah, like it reminded me of that one from a bunch of years ago, that the overweight kid that was running just in the country roads, like from Nike. I forget. I think it was Just Do It. Like just get out there, just do it. It kind of has that like
vibe.
Yeah.
It almost really feels like they're going back to their roots a little bit.
Yeah. And this is where I'm saying like this might be my own bias, because I genuinely don't know all the other ads they've been putting out. And maybe they're all like that. I don't know. But I don't know, it just kind of caught my eye, and it was one of those ones in the context of all the Nike stuff we've been talking about recently. It seems like a really good, great piece of creative.
Yeah, it's great. Great pick. Great pick.
Yeah.
Okay, what's coming up next week?
Well, we have, speaking of AI,
Oh boy.
Peter Weinberg from Evidenza is
That's
in the house, V. Super interesting conversation, and all those things you were talking about. With, and I know you're unfortunately not able to join us on that one, but we'll have a good post pod on that one. The AI role in advertising, what they're doing at Evidenza is fascinating. Like synthetic personas that you can survey, create market data, market research from. And then with the click of a button, in a matter of like, let's call it hours, maybe minutes, produce a finance-ready marketing strategy that talks about the value of each segment, the financial value of going after all these different segments, the way you segment out the market, and then a plan around how to get from A to B and how much you'd have to invest in, making penetration in each one of those segments and so on and so forth.
That's crazy.
So interesting. So interesting what they're doing.
Well, tune in, everybody. I know I'll be tuning in.
So yeah, and we got a lot of good stuff coming up, even after that. So yeah, I'm really excited about the lineup.
Yeah, no, really do. And that
until next time.
I was just gonna say, it just brings us to a close. I know we're off to go chase some profitability at the cult gathering in Banff.
Yeah, together even. We might even be there together, see each other in real life, not just on camera.
That is going to
be great.
Yeah, it's going to be great.